Good afternoon, Mavericks. We are back again, and today I am very excited. We are going to speak with Charles Turner, the CEO of Kare, with a K. But real quick, before we dive in, I want to talk about our show, who's being powered by Serenity. Again, Serenity is making a pledge to help long-term care facilities stay connected during this corona pandemic. Their goal is to work with 50 Colorado-based senior living communities, giving them their HIPAA-compliant messaging and photo app for free for the next 3 months. So check out the links below. Learn more about Serenity Engage and how it can help your community stay connected during the corona pandemic. And with that, I'm going to bring in Catherine Wells, our Chief Inspiration Maverick. So Kathy, take it over.
Thanks, Francis, our Chief Curiosity Maverick, and also the man behind the curtain who runs these shows right now. So thank you for that. So really happy to be here. And Francis and I have been doing Facebook Lives now. I think this might be our third or fourth or fifth around the COVID-19. We're excited to be talking with Charles Turner today. We spoke with Charles maybe 3 weeks ago in Boston at the Senior Transformation Summit before all this COVID-19 broke out. And when we spoke with Charles and we released his podcast earlier this week, we talked about the Kare model. So Charles, why don't you give our audience here a brief background on you and on Kare with the K?
Yeah, so I'll try to make it brief. So my background is, I was a developer and operator and owner of assisted living memory care buildings, kind of all over Texas, Florida, Georgia, and New Mexico. Prior to that, I was in the technology space, having nothing to do with this industry whatsoever. Stumbled into real estate development and senior housing decade ago, 12 years ago or so, and then we had our own operating company. And because of my background, I would invest and advise in anywhere from small companies to Fortune 500 companies on sort of the intersection of aging and technology. And then, I decided, I think, we said on the podcast, the two major challenges facing senior housing operators today, if you ask any CEO, they're usually the two of the top three things are, one, the overbuilding problem, and two, labor. And so, I decided I'd help solve the overbuilding problem, but I don't think the world needs another 86-unit assisted living and memory care, or at least in most areas. And two, we built a labor app called Kare. It's Kare with the K. Website is doyoucare.com, again, Kare with the K. But think of it like an Uber-like platform for caregivers and med techs and nurses to fill open shifts at a price that is far less than agency and overtime. And then at the end of the day, if you like people that come in and work for you based on our platform, you can hire them at no charge. So it's a great way to expedite your hiring process. It's a great way to save a lot of money. And then, of course, now we've taken on a whole new dimension of sort of on-demand labor as the labor force has become, let's just say, it's been pretty wonky, right, over the past couple of weeks. And I think, let's just be honest, over the next several weeks, it's probably going to get worse. We have been bringing on a lot of customers, sort of contingency labor when and if they need everything. So, we launched the product the end of October. We are live now in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, in Austin, and then several tertiary markets around Texas, like, Beaumont, San Marcos, Bryan College Station, things like that. And then we'll be launching in Atlanta here in about a month. And we'll be hitting like 3 major markets about every quarter is our plan right now.
Wow.
That's great. And what you're doing to serve the market is really, really needed, and even more so right now in the face of COVID-19. So,
yeah, it is.
Yeah. And so we're waiting for you to come here to Colorado as we.
Yeah, that's like I think I said, it's probably 20. It's definitely on the roadmap. Maybe we have a lot of customers who really need us to get there. So we're excited to be there.
Yeah. I think we're excited for you guys to get here too, because we have, we've had our population has really started to change. We're definitely having more older adults that, we're having more facilities that are built throughout the state, because we have about 5 million totally in the state. And yet I feel like we don't have enough labor at all right now to support those that are aging. So we are very excited that you're going to be coming here.
Yeah. And so someday we've talked about labor dynamics before, watched the previous podcast, but we talked a lot about, the problems with that. We can talk about that another day, but yeah, I think generally speaking, the problem's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yes, sir.
So today, Charles, we wanted to talk with you because you recently did a survey of 150 caregivers about how they feel about COVID-19. So tell us about the survey and how you went about it, who you spoke with, and what some of the results were.
Yeah, thanks. So it was something we did for ourselves. We started about a week ago. We did this. So we have several hundred people that work on our platform, and we, like everybody else, are trying to figure out, let's forecast our own business. What does that business look like? And do we need to be afraid? Is there going to be a major disruption in our business? And so we asked, it had to be very kind of quick and easy, down and dirty survey. So we just asked 4 questions, which we'll share in a little bit. And then once we got the results back, we realized, there's a lot of information just in these 4 questions that I think will be beneficial, for our industry. So, I've also part of a lot of different industry initiatives, not just labor, but we talk to a lot of folks, and everybody's very worried about, supplies right now, PPE and personal protective equipment, which we'll talk about that as well. But and everybody's talking about what should our plans be? What should our policies and procedures be? What is CDC saying? And again, we definitely should be doing that. But I haven't heard a lot of chatter about frankly, what are the frontline caregivers, nurses, and caregivers think? I mean, let's talk to them. Let's ask them. So we asked them. I'll share this here in a second. Okay, I got to remember how to do that. I'm going to sharing the screen, and then let me make sure y'all can. I'm going to blow this up. All right, can y'all see that?
But yeah,
right, yeah. Good questions, right? And the first one, we're just asking straight up, like, what are you feeling about the coronavirus? Are you afraid, or are you not? And the good news is, when you look at it, the vast majority of them are, I think they're concerned, but everyone's taking proper precautions. I mean, I would say the results of this, if you look at the people that are on this, probably 80%, maybe 85, 90% are frontline caregivers. I'm talking like CNAs, care aides, and about 10 to 50% of them are nurses. We haven't gone back and it was a blind survey, so we don't exactly know what our population mix was, but that's generally reflective of our population mix. And so we got about 150 results back, and this is what they said. So the vast majority said, they're concerned, and they're taking proper precautions. So from that standpoint, great. You don't have a lot of fear from your labor force. And then the second, like, okay, how do they feel about the facilities that they're working, in? Frankly, we wanted to know if they were going to environments where they didn't feel safe. The good news is, again, I think the vast majority of them felt like the facilities are prepared for the residents. I mean, a good portion, about a third of them did say, like, they're doing everything they can, but frankly, we're a little cynical. We don't think it's going to do any good. But it sounds like everybody's, putting their best foot forward to do the best they can. Then the next 2 questions were really about them and how they feel about their safety and their personal situation. So we asked them, do you feel you're going to get it? Are you not going to be able to work because of the coronavirus? Again, the vast majority of them said, that they're concerned, but it really won't change their ability to pick up shifts. The other thing I thought was fascinating, which is very positive, the last one here, said not only are they not, they may be concerned, but they're going to want to pick up more shifts. And I think, as we talked about in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, the people who work in our industry, it's a tough job, right? There's not a lot of glamour in it. There's not a lot of thanks in it, but they're still very missional. And what I really appreciate about this question is, they're still very missional about it. They're going to actually want to pick up more shifts to help out our caring community. So that's what I love. Now, this last question I thought was interesting, right? And so we can talk about, some macro factors with this. And the question is, when businesses, schools, daycare, things like that, if they're shutting down, is it basically going to affect your ability to work? Now, we asked this for our benefit with our heroes. Everybody in our platform is called a hero. But we asked, when our heroes are going to be able to pick up shifts. But this also, I think, can be applied to any of our caring communities. And so the the vast majority, 70% of them said it really won't have any ability to pick up shifts. But there were, call it a third of them that it will at least affect them somewhat, if not completely. They have a kid at home, they've got a loved one at home, the normal daycare or school can't take care of. I've got to take care of my loved one, and there's a bunch of reasons. Like my car broke down, but I can't get it fixed. Right? We actually had that situation 2 days ago. Car broke down, they can't get it fixed because the mechanics that she goes to is normally they're shut down. So, these kind of things happen. So you take, a third of these folks that their ability to pick up a shift or ability to work is at least somewhat inhibited. Extrapolate that over the millions and millions and millions of units of skilled nursing facilities and assisted living facilities, and you start to realize the scope of the problem where, 10 to 20% of your workforce may be impacted in coming to work. Now, this data is almost a week old now, so this is sort of the front end of that. The ramp up. It would be interesting if we did this now or maybe even next week if these numbers change. Yeah. Because my guess is people are starting to be affected. The virus is actually hitting facilities, or it's hitting family members, or it's making people more afraid. And we may be getting to the point where in the next couple of weeks, as this goes on, we may start to solve some of our PPE problems, I hope. Yeah. But then we have problems with our labor. And so, this is not only the right forum to plug what we do, but we can help fill that. But we need to start, as an industry, start planning on different contingency plans of how do we get extra labor. And frankly, the other thing we need to do is petition our state governments to figure out how we can bring people in that can care for people, but may not. Maybe your state has a very esoteric, very rigid, stringent credentialing process. If we can petition our state governments to relax that. For instance, the two states that are being hit the most with coronavirus, California and New York. What are the two of the states that has the most stringent and rigorous onboarding processes and credentialing processes? California and New York. So again, I'm not saying their policies are bad by any stretch of the imagination. They're very well intentioned and they're probably very good. But there are a lot of people that could perform care duties and they could somehow, frankly, standardize across the nation. We might actually be able to bring more people into the workforce.
Well, yeah. And I think that's a good point you bring up, Charles, is it's a standardization, is that, state to state is so different.
Right.
That it is a challenge, because if you're willing to, they're willing to fly from or drive from here, maybe to California to help out. If you're a nurse or a CNA, you really have to deal with the rigors of the credentialing. So I think that's a very interesting point you bring up.
Think about Portland, Oregon, right? So Portland sits right there on the border of Oregon and Washington State. If I want to go work in Vancouver, right across the river, they have a very different process,
good
right?
point.
And so if we said, if everybody has there's some form of baseline, or at least say, like skilled nursing, generally speaking, in any state, if you're a CNA or you're an LPN or LVN, you can kind of go anywhere. But with assisted living, it doesn't work that way. It's everything's all over the board. So, okay, what if we standardize? It's like, okay, you have that, but maybe if you already have this credential, you automatically bypass that. It will ramp up the need for credentialing in the long run, but it'll at least take those people that are credentialed and make them, okay, there's a big hotspot in whatever, Boise, Idaho.
Right.
People who want to work in Boise, Idaho can go, just like a traveling nurse does as an RN, you could do that as a CNA.
Great idea. I think that's really important to look outside the box here.
Yeah.
And it's a great learning. We've been talking in every one of these episodes about what can we be learning as an industry or as a nation or as a world that we will improve on over time as we get through this, because these are the things that are triggering us to be thinking differently and really starting to fix the issues that we maybe knew existed, but they weren't urgent. They weren't as important to fix as they are right now. So that's a good one to talking about.
Did you ask him, was there any fear about bringing the virus home? Because that's been a consistent theme of bringing possibly the exposure to their family or their kids. Did that come up at all?
No, we didn't ask that question. I'm sure that fear is out there. I will say this. It doesn't necessarily answer that question, but what was really interesting to me is even sort of that frontline CNA, how generally educated they are on what is going on with, say, CDC recommendations.
Mhm.
And so we've had, we're in a bunch of different buildings, and we have, one of the things that we do is we collect everybody's infection control processes, and we load them on our system. So before you go work in that building, you have to read this thing and acknowledge it. And so, so at least when they go there, they know what that particular community's policy is. And the amazing thing that we found is when we asked them, it ranges anywhere between like a little cartoon one pager, like here's how you wash your hands, to literally in one case there's a 700-page infection control policy. It was crazy. Huh. I think there's a happy medium in there somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing was we've had a few, not a lot, a few communities that have, we looked at, they have good infection control processes, but our heroes, the ones that work on our platform, they've gone and they've told us, they're like, we're not working there anymore. And frankly, their own staff's not working there anymore because they're letting anybody in the building. There's no controls. The family members are coming and going. The staff is quitting, and there's just, they're not enforcing the policies that they have. And so that word, can get out, and unfortunately, it can create bad rumors like, oh, they have the coronavirus, like they don't have the coronavirus, right? But those things start to snowball a lot. And so if I'm a caregiver, to answer your question, I don't want to go in there and possibly get affected and then come back and bring it to my family.
Right. Yeah. That's a big concern. Rightfully so. Right. Is that I think as facilities and residences, whatever you want to term, it's their job to give the framework, right? To give the structure and allow the team to be successful within that infection control protocol.
Yeah.
And I think if everybody follows that, we give ourselves the best chance to mitigate the possible exposure, but also protect the staff. So we have direct care staff to fill those shifts. And with that, I think it's a good segue. What are the challenges you're seeing around, staffing and call-offs?
Yeah. As it pertains to the coronavirus with, I'll say this. I mean, the way our platform works, let's talk about our customers themselves. Mm-hmm. We are seeing a lot of last minute shifts being posted. It's in a way, it's almost like Thanksgiving and Christmas. So on our platform, Thanksgiving and Christmas, you're gonna a lot of last minute call-offs, or sort of like, we need someone, and we're gonna, with us, you can our customers set their rates. We don't set the rates. But they can also offer to pay a bonus if they need someone quickly. And so we've seen some bonuses. They feel it's almost like Christmas or New Year's or Thanksgiving, where these big bonuses will pop up, especially on the SNF side, but also on the AL side. But they've gone in the last week to 10 days. They've really, I think, gone up quite a bit. And so that tells me, obviously, they're having a lot more call-offs for them. Now, we're able to fill them, but it is causing a lot more call-offs. So, why that's happening, how it's related to, this is speculation at this point. It goes back to that last slide I showed you, where that sort of marginal 20%-ish are, their kids are that's home. And we had a few things as well. We've had people cancel shifts because, gosh, I thought I had a babysitter. My kid can't go to school, and I've got to take care of my child. We're seeing that on our end, and we have some contingencies for that. But we do see that. We're seeing that a little bit more than normal. This week was definitely more than last week. I'm willing to bet the next week is going to be even more than this week.
Well, yeah, what I'm concerned with too is that a lot of times when those car issues happen or things like that, we're able to use Ubers, Lyfts, some other, ride share, which I know ride share is also being kind of restricted, possibly depending on where you are, which could be an impact, I think, to get people to their shifts as well too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we have, it's really interesting. We'll go through all the dynamics of it, but I think one of the things that I would encourage operators to do is to really, look at like Uber Enterprise. I think Lyft has an enterprise product as well. I know, I'm in Houston, so we lived through Hurricane Harvey, and we became the masters of using Uber Enterprise and Lyft Enterprise function. So what that means is, instead of my employee picking up an Uber coming, we can actually schedule it and tell them where to pick up at a specific point in time for them, and we pay for it. And I would encourage that. We have some of the people cars break down, flat tires, kids break a leg or whatever. It happens all the time. Where we encourage them to take an Uber, take a Lyft, and they're like, well, I can't afford to do that. Now we're a marketplace; these are our employees. So it's a different dynamic. But we say, like, you should look at taking an Uber, even if it's going to cost you something. It's better than losing all your income and losing any future shifts that you may have if someone can't rely on you. So it's depending on where you are, I think having that relationship, understanding, working with those platforms at an enterprise level is, again, it's another area in your quiver where if you need it and someone can't come in and you really need someone and to provide a ride, it's probably well worth it to take care of your residents.
I think a couple things there. I did not know about the enterprise options for Uber and Lyft. So I think that's really interesting for us to share with our audience.
And I can talk firsthand on it. We've used it a lot for a lot of our shifts, Uber and Lyft, because especially in the winter, someone says their car's not starting, things like that. It helps us get them to their shift very effectively.
Yeah, I learned it the hard way during Hurricane Harvey. I mean, I was the CEO of our operating company. We had, 700 employees or something all over Texas. And I was the one waking up, we take shift to schedule an Uber to go to somebody's house. And finally someone told us, Uber for Enterprise, you can schedule it ahead of time at their place. We're like, dummy.
Yeah.
So we learned the hard way.
Yeah. Charles, you're the 5th person I've spoken to in the last 2 days that lived through Hurricane Harvey and has had to experience the rebuilding after that. And I started thinking this morning that what are the things we can be learning from what you all lived through and other places that have had natural disasters recently, that they had to rebuild their city, recover from this? Businesses didn't all recover from it. What are some of the things that come to mind for you that we can learn from that?
You have to kind of separate out the physical destruction part of it that obviously we're not facing now, but where we but at the same point in time, it is, looking at trying to find PPE, trying to and trying to make sure you have your staffed appropriately. Some ways very, very similar. Now, obviously, this is at a 1,000 times X more than a specific hurricane because this is a national and international problem. But trying to find masks, like we did the same thing in the hurricane. So I can't say there's a lesson learned. Obviously in the future, great. In the future, if there's a pandemic, we need to have a big box of masks, but that doesn't help us right now. But the other thing we learned is, we had our buildings, the ones in Houston were fine, physical, but our employees were not. And so we have people that were literally working around the clock for 3 or 4 days. And we actually would fly people into San Antonio and drive them in and down I-10. There was one interstate that was open for about 4 or 5 days. Only way to get anything in and out. So we actually flew people from all of our buildings to San Antonio and then drove them in. Now, obviously, that doesn't make any sense in this environment. But if I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know, it's a lot of what we're talking about now is your staffing contingency, and not to put too fine a point. Half of the inspiration of Kare, of what we built, was built around Hurricane Harvey. Of, gosh, if there was a marketplace where I could just post a shift and someone who's qualified can come in and work it, I can relieve Jeannie, who's been working for 3 days straight, 24 hours straight on her feet, and she's exhausted. She's missional. She's going to do it, but she's about to fall over. If I had that tool at that time, I'm like, that's the greatest thing ever. So because everybody can kind of pull their own resources together and not competing against each other. Right? The same thing that happened. What's happening right now on the PPE front is you have different trade organizations that are trying to fight for the same PPE, as well as the states, as well as Medicare, as well as the country. Now they're starting to come together. But they're competing with each other, and it's forcing prices up and distribution problems. Well, if we all came together, right, and had one giant way of doing it, it's the same thing on labor. If we had one marketplace where we could all go to for supplemental labor,
so really,
we're all in a better position.
Really, Kare with a K is a little bit born out of your experience from Hurricane Harvey. That's amazing. Well, we keep talking about necessity as the mother of invention, and that's not a new phrase, and it's really showing itself right now. It's wonderful. So, Charles, tell us a little bit about communication best practices.
Yeah, and I think I touched on that a little bit when I said about some of these communities. policies and procedures are great. We have to have them, have to be state compliant, but it also ties a lot with what we learned in the hurricane situations where you can't communicate enough. And I'm sure most companies now have, communication platforms. We were with all family members. We were sending out emails, I think 4 times a day, and I think we were having call-ins kind of morning and at night, just updating everything, just to keep people's minds at ease. Now that's great for the family members, but from the employee side, if you have a vacuum of information, we have seen this firsthand. We're seeing this right now in a lot of our some of our customers, not a lot of them, just a small handful. If you have a vacuum of information, rumors run rampant. So you have to get ahead of the communication in all forms. Most of our labor pool, we're finding, this is anecdotal, but we've done this a jillion times. I'd say at best, half of them respond to email. 25% of them will respond to a phone call. 75% will respond to a text. And so,
did you say 75% to a text? Is that what you said?
Will respond to a text, or at least acknowledge that they read it.
Okay.
So, text-based platforms for communicating everything, or even if you communicate something that links back to a bigger communication, we're finding that has really worked well for us just in our normal processes. But even now, as we're pumping out, we're kind of updating our process and policies to be compliant with our customers as well as our best practice for our heroes. And we're finding that we send them an email, a newsletter, it hardly ever gets read. But if we send them a text that has a link to it, or a link to a video, a brief video, videos actually work really well if they're brief. And we have a lot of engagement on video or video as a result of text.
Well, when you mean brief, just for our audience, what is it, like 30-second, 45-second clip, or?
We did a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes thing the other day. Just we really wanted to update everybody. We really wanted people to know what was going on with us and how we're trying to keep everybody else safe. And so we did a blast to everybody in our platform, either in the application process or already onboarded. So a couple thousand people. And we said, letter from, message, very important message from CEO, please watch this quick video. And then we linked to the video we put on YouTube, and it was a minute and a half. And, we could see our engagement was pretty high, like frankly, way higher than I expected. It was short, 90 seconds or so.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a great tip, though. That's a really great tip. Because I think that's one thing that a lot of people struggle is they might communicate really well with the resident or the family, and they forget about that importance of that team member that's on the floor, that's on the front line to share that same information. Because the more we communicate, the better off we're going to be, and you're going to stop those rumor mills or these ideas that, they don't know what they're doing, or they didn't tell us that. That can't be true.
Well, there are a bunch of tools. They're cheap. They're maybe, I don't know if they may be free to a point, or very inexpensive, and you use them for a small amount of time. Like Grasshopper, Avocado. There's a handful of them where if you can get everybody's phone numbers loaded, maybe you pull it from your payroll system. Everyone's cell phone numbers loaded on that platform. You send out one blast message, and they get it, and then you can put it'll hyperlink to something. It's a quick and dirty process. I mean, our system's very sophisticated. It's all embedded in ours, but there's third-party apps that you can do that fairly inexpensively and for a short period of time.
Very cool.
That's great. So Charles, 1 year from today, looking back at what we will have experienced in this coming next 12 months, what would you like to see the world look like? What would you like us all to learn?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a great conversation last night with a friend of mine about this, who's kind of the front lines of helping kind of help the industry with a lot of the stuff. And it's like, okay, what does the world look like in the future? I think what we're going to probably realize that the idea that we are primarily a hospitality industry is going to be thrown out the window. I think you're going to realize that it's going to greatly accelerate how we align with the medical community, how we care for people from an infection control process, how we do things like, I think it's going to I mean, there's certain things I'm excited about. I think that the rampant advent in telemedicine and telehealth
Yes.
is going to be fascinating. The adoption of EHR things are going to be fascinating. Labor marketplaces for on-demand labor, and just accepting this, of knowing that we've got to, first and foremost, we need to have someone who's qualified to work. And yes, we need to have the right culture, but we need to make sure we're caring for people. We have to meet those base level requirements. I think generally you're going to see that over time. And I think the operators that really adopt, whatever electronic medium of communication, Zoom calls or things like that, I actually think it's going to fundamentally change the role of like a regional director of operations, where you're not going to have hey, so how many leads you got today? Hey, how are your residents? How's your food? Great. Click. It's going to be, what are my measures and metrics, and how do I know I'm being effective or not? Because we're going to force this level of remote measurement. We have no choice. We can't be on site. We have to put a sort of remote measurement, and that's got to be aggregated in some sort of way. And we actually have a tool, not at Kare, but we actually created a tool that does that, and I'm trying to push it. But we built that a couple of years ago, knowing this kind of world is coming. I just think it's coming faster than we think. This is going to force us to do it.
And I agree with that. I'm really excited to, playing off that a little bit, is the idea that we can do things more remotely, even for resident engagement. We're doing a lot of things. We're streaming our music therapy, our art therapists. We're doing some engagement cross with webcams and stuff, where we can see them and they can now see us, to improve engagement through activities that you maybe could now get a professional person from New York to do something for a resident in California. I mean, I'm really excited to see how we can improve the engagement and the experience for those that are in the different residences.
Well, I think, as I've invested and advised different technology startups, one of the things I've never loved is when you put a form factor in front of a senior that they're not used to using. Generally speaking, if they're not used to using an iPad, or they're not used to interacting with their TV in a different way, it's just, I think the hurdle rate's higher. But what's going to happen now is, guess what? How many I just look at the social media of the buildings that I'm involved with. There's call outs like, we need more iPads, we need more cell phones, or whatever. And so, things like, again, the Serenity app, it's going to be where I would have said 3 months ago, yeah, maybe. Now it's like, the physical adoption of a new form factor for an 84-year-old, woman living in an assisted living facility, that's not going to be foreign to them. So I think it's going to greatly adopt all those resident engagement technologies that have relied on a form factor that were frankly designed for a younger generation. I think it's kind of exciting in a way. Let's get past this stuff, but I think the adoption is going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, and we talked about this when we were at the Senior Living Transformation Summit. The 60% of the CEOs of the care communities will be turning over in the next 5 years. I actually have a hypothesis that COVID-19 will accelerate that, not for any reason other than, okay, I think I'm ready to retire. I don't mean to indicate that anyone's going to die off here.
Yeah.
There's a great ED in Houston, probably one of the best in Houston, she was fantastic. Her building flooded in a Hurricane Harvey. It's a memory care only building, flooded in Hurricane Harvey, and just the stories were amazing for another day. But she literally came out. She's like, you know what? I'm just going into independent living. I am not doing assisted living.
Done, right? Let me just move in.
I'm just going to do independent living now.
Yeah. And I think with that turnover, we will see a lot more exciting, new, interesting things in terms of how technology can be used to improve quality of life. I was talking with one of my customers yesterday, and he said, I got on a Skype session with my mom who has dementia, and she didn't understand why I was in the TV, and she wanted to know why I couldn't get out of the TV and come hug her. And, I think that those are things that it's so new. They've never had to deal with that. And so what a great opportunity, if we look at it that way, to teach people some new things, and also to learn from people who've been through things like this. Our older adults have lived through a lot of really hard times that we haven't had to at our age. And so we should learn from them as well. So, Myra, you're wonderful. Myra Pacheco from Bronx, New York City.
Yeah, she said hello.
She's saying, hang in there and bless you all. Thank you for sharing. That's wonderful. Thank you, Myra. We appreciate you and everybody else who's out there. So, Charles, this has been wonderful. We appreciate talking to you. And if people want to learn more about Kare, how can they find you?
It's easy. You can go to doyoukare.com. Again, that is Kare with a K. That's probably the easiest way. Our contact information is on there. You can go, our LinkedIn sites. We're kind of all over the social media stuff. That's probably the easiest way. Just go to our website.
And then real quick, do you have updates as to where you're targeting next, for where Kare is going to be released, or is that kind of more of an internal discussion?
It's still internal. We have some final. So understand, Kare is very much an industry-driven initiative. So it's not just us, right? We have a lot of the major operators have invested in us. Real estate funds, large real estate funds, the senior housing funds have invested in us. Bob Kramer is founder of NIC, who's an investor in us. And so the reason we did it that way, it was actually led by them. These guys wanted to come together and do it, is really to create, we just are now launching in Dallas, San Antonio, and then Atlanta, as well as these tertiary markets as well. And so give us a month or so to let that kind of play out. Then we'll get back together. Okay, where do we go next? We have some finalists. We won't reveal quite yet, okay. But I think there are probably 6 cities. We'll pick 3.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then we'll keep growing.
Awesome.
Love the way you're revolutionizing this. It's really important.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time on a Friday. We're glad you're able to share. This is, I hope, helpful information for people to really understand and talk more with their care teams and their teams, and understand that we need to take care of our residents, but also our team members as well too, and understand their concerns and their maybe fears or apprehensions. So I really think the research you're doing and trying to better understand our frontline work is going to help the industry just continue to improve. So thank you.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me too.
You bet.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.